Works. It sounds good. Okay, we are off. Okay, so welcome to this Pixel Fondue live stream. I know it's been a little while through the holidays before we got things ramped up again, but we got this one today. We've got another one coming in a few weeks with Keyshot, and which should be fun as well. Today we're with Kane, and Kane's last name is harder to pronounce than my last name, and his first name is Hagop, but we've always just called him Kane. And I've known Kane for a number of years. Probably knowing us and how much we've aged, it's probably been a long time, right? It's probably been like 15 years. But Kane, I never actually worked with Kane aside from some smaller projects, but Kane started working at a company that was the first company I worked at called Fatbox in Redwood City. And how long ago was that?
That was in like 2006.
So like 15 years ago. Right. So I worked there through this sort of .com boom and bust and left and started Sabretooth. And Kane, some of my friends were still working there, and they said, I got this new animator, this new lightwave guy who's really good. His name's Kane. And eventually had met you through something or other there. But I thought that was, anyway, that's my connection to Kane. And when I saw that he had published this book, I think it was my LinkedIn page maybe. Did you put out the word on LinkedIn?
Yep.
So I sort of reached out and thought, okay, so here's a guy who accomplished something I think we've all thought about as you know, professional animators or hobbyists, creating our own project, whether it's a game or a movie or a short film or a little animation or a graphic novel or a novel. And Kane actually did it, and that's kind of rare. It's hard to actually finish these things. So I wanted to reach out and do a little live stream on just sort of the process he went through to, you know, what his inspiration was and how he actually managed to get this done while holding down a job as a full-time, you know, creative director at Viscera, which is a fantastic animation studio in San Francisco. So does it sound about right, Kane? Okay.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Long introduction, but there's a bit of a history here. In fact, let's start talking just a little bit about how you got into 3D initially, going back 15, 20 years, and sort of how you got here today, because that's part of the thing is, you know, a lot of people, when I first got into 3D, I thought, I'm going to make all my own stuff. But once I got a job, the years just kind of went by and by and by. So you've been a professional for probably, 15, 20 years, and now you're releasing this book now. So how did you get into this going back into the early 2000s?
So that takes us quite a bit back, actually. But I guess the first thing to mention is I've always been an artist, and I wanted to be an animator even as a kid in sixth grade. I decided that I would be an animator, and my goal was to animate the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So that's where it all began.
There you go.
From there, I did stop motion animation at home with my own toys and things like that.
Wait, stop motion animation, this is before the era of the iPhone. So what were you using to do that?
This was a giant camcorder that my parents had that had a stop motion feature. They could press one frame at a time and record it.
Like a VHS camcorder.
Exactly. So I would record on that and edit on that as well. So I would actually plug the camcorder to the VCR and edit using the VCR and the camcorder connected to each other.
Yeah, those weren't exactly frame accurate, if you remember. If you're within...
That was challenging, to say the least, but it was very exciting and fun. I loved doing it. We did Lego animations with our Legos and set them on fire, all of the fun things you want to do. But really, I started my real animation career basically as a senior in high school. I got an internship with a kid genius who had his own company in Fresno, and he taught me 3D animation. He taught me Lightwave. That's where I got my start.
Who's the kid genius?
His name was Mike Randra, and he basically graduated SF State like when he was 14.
Oh, wow. So, well, you know, it's a small enough community, especially old Lightwave people, that it's possible somebody listening actually knows him or has heard of him or worked with him.
Yeah, we had a small place called Dream Speed Studios, did commercials, video game cinematics, so lots of stuff, local commercials in Fresno. But yeah, learned animation there, and then went on to kind of get a degree in actual animation, in like traditional animation. So went to SF State, got a cinema degree, and began freelancing. Worked on game cinematics, X-Men Legends, and Chronicles of Riddick.
So you did go to school and get a degree in essentially this field. I mean,
correct. So I do have a BA in cinema.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a traditional animation emphasis, but didn't learn 3D there. The 3D animation is what I learned on the job interning.
Right.
DreamSpeed. But yeah, I've been doing 3D animation since 1997. So 23 years, is that right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm not going to do the math. I don't want.
Yeah, so doing 3D animation for a really long time. And for the past 12 years, I've been here at Viscera doing pharmaceutical animation. So we have a whole animation team here using Modo, Maya, Cinema 4D, everything. And even before that, I was doing medical device animations at Fatbox Films. So lots of history doing 3D.
Right. And so you've been at Viscera, I think you said, what, 12 years? Is that right?
Almost. Well, let's say 11 and a half.
11 or 12, right. And so if you don't know, Viscera is just a fantastic animation studio in San Francisco, and they do a lot of like biotech animation, right? So you're doing a lot of like maybe a cancer drug coming into the cell, really super detailed models and things passing through cell membranes, and a lot of really kind of interesting stuff like that. And of course, you know, that biotech is a different kind of field than high tech or even medical device, where the types of animations you're doing, there's a lot of technical review, and you know, you have to get the science right. And you're not a biology major, but I'm sure you've picked up a lot of that on the job. You feel like
yeah, no, definitely. It's something I found that I really enjoy doing scientific animation, and it's something I understand pretty easily, so I can get a grasp of a scientific concept, how it works, how the pathway works, and then bring that to life in animation. So it's definitely something that is also spilled over into my creative stuff and the book that I wrote, because it has a scientific angle to it as well.
Right, and so so we're moving on to the book, and Kane has a PDF, so I'll bring that up in just a second. But you know, as you're going through just the life of going into work and working as animations day in and day out, you also have a family, and so you've got a home life, like many of us do. And at what point did you decide, like, was it a sort of, I need to do this, start working on this project now? Or it's never going to happen? Or did you get some free time? Or when did you decide to actually jump in, to the deep end and start working on it?
So, I mean, the work that we do at Viscera is, fun. But it is scientific animation all day, every day. And as much as we try to add character animation in some projects and do some more creative things, again, a lot of it is purely high science. So I was always looking for additional avenues to explore more creative things, more storytelling, because I love storytelling. And this just happened to be at the right place at the right time. I was playing with my son and his rocks and minerals. So he has a little collection. And we were looking at them, and I was looking at a piece of pyrite, and I looked at it and I was like, wow, this is truly gorgeous. I think this would look really good in CG. How would I recreate this shader? And then all the other rocks and minerals, they all started sparking my imagination of what they would look like in CG. So that's literally where it all came to life, because my background is shading and lighting. So I'm really interested in that. And when I saw the rocks and minerals, I really wanted to make them into 3D characters.
Right. And that happens with a lot of us, right? Especially when you do a lot of 3D, you're often just out in the world and you see things and you start thinking, like, how would I recreate this? And things like that. So I'm actually going to bring up, share my screen here so you can see it as well. And let's do a share screen, and we'll just do entire screen. Boom, share. And so just looking at, hidden gems. And if you don't know, let's just talk a little bit about the concept of the book prior to sort of digging into the actual
Yep.
the actual characters and everything. And so, right. So you look at these rocks. You're thinking about wanting to make make these in 3D and then create a story. Like, did this sort of? Have you ever written a book before? Is writing an interest of yours? Like, why did you choose a book instead of like an animation?
Well, so we'll get to the kind of the full story because it actually started off as an animation.
Oh,
and
okay.
then became a book.
All right.
So I don't have experience writing that much. And honestly, since I'm an immigrant to the US, I couldn't really read English until probably the 4th grade.
Oh, wow.
So it wasn't necessarily something that was, top of mind to read and to write. It's probably a good thing that I didn't write before or didn't know kind of what it was going to take because it probably would have scared me off. Where this started is as an idea for just stories. It became just bedtime stories that I was telling my kids. I would create characters and say, what would happen if this character did this? And we would tell little adventures. And that's made me go, you know what? I would love to turn this into a feature animated film. So to be fair, I did start this off as an exercise to create a feature animated film called Hidden Gems.
Right.
And for the first phase of this whole project, that's what I was working towards. So I brought on a couple of friends to do some concept art for the characters. But while they were doing that, I was writing down ideas. I was taking notes. I was basically, anytime I had spare time, I would write stuff down on my phone. And then I did a lot of the writing on BART. So I have a 30-minute commute. So I would sit down on BART and I would pull out my laptop and start writing up the script.
Right. So for those of you who don't know, BART is a train going into San Francisco in the morning. So Kane obviously getting up in the morning, getting on a train, making good use of his time instead of just reading the internet or reading the news.
Playing Pokemon.
So that's kind of a key, right? Take time. Part of the key to getting this done is grabbing what time you have and making the most of it.
That was absolutely critical. So if I didn't utilize the time on BART or some of that extra time I had when I took my son to karate classes or, weekend soccer games or my daughter's ballet, all the, typical things.
Right.
So while they were in class, while my daughter's in ballet, I would actually take my son to a coffee shop because my wife was watching my daughter, and we would go to the coffee shop. I would spend that time, it was like 30 minutes maybe or 45 minutes, doing a little bit of writing while my son either played on his tablet or read a book, and go back and pick him up and continue our weekend. So it's really about taking advantage of those little moments that you might have to do, what you want to do. And I thought it was important that my son also sees that I'm doing something with that time and being productive.
So when you're working on that and you've got your son there, is he pitching in with ideas? Are you bouncing ideas off of him?
Oh yeah. So my son is my number one editor. I'm currently working on book 2, and every chapter I finish, I give it to him. He reads it, tells me what he thinks, and then we go on to the next chapter. So he's probably read the first book, 10, 15, 20 times in all iterations. The long version, and every time I edit it down, he's read it.
Now that's awesome. And how old is your son?
He's 9 now. So we started when he was 7.
Right. And I remember, first hearing about this when I bumped into you at SIGGRAPH in Vancouver a couple of years ago. Well, about a year and a half ago, I guess, right? And you had shown, at that point, you had some illustrations. You had it pretty well laid out. But you've been working on it quite a bit since then. When did you publish? It was pretty recently, right? Just like a month or two ago?
Yeah, so I published the print-on-demand version in August of last year. And then I got my hardcovers, the actual printed hardcovers in end of December. So I missed the holiday rush, but
right.
It was just in December. So now I have the physical copies with me.
So let's back up a little bit. So let's go back to the characters. Again, I want to bring up some of the images you had put up there. Do you want to talk about the characters a little bit, how you sort of developed those? Okay, let me try sharing my screen again. And then we'll bring up the characters here. We do share screen. Share.
And in the presentation, I did put some timelines because I think it's important to see. So this right here, just the overall timeline. It shows that this started in 2017 at the end of it, but then it was an idea for a feature film for the first half of 2018.
Okay.
So that's when I wrote the script and did a lot of this character design you're going to see. And then halfway through 2018, I basically decided that, trying to pitch this as a feature film is going to be really challenging. And I need to do something that keeps the momentum going on this project,
right?
While I continue to try to pitch the film. So I decided, hey, it'd be easy to turn this into a picture book, and that's that 1 month phase you see there. And then working with my editor, she said, yeah, the story that you're developing is not necessarily for a picture book level. It's more of a novel, so you should write a novel instead. And then you can see that I transitioned to turning the feature script that was a picture book into a novel. And that phase went from 2018 to early 2019.
So,
and then,
go ahead.
You can see the big gap there between January 2019 when the novel was ready,
right,
to
year.
December 2019 when I had everything done and printed.
So so a year. So you had the novel written in Correct. January. Was the artwork done in January?
A lot of the illustrations were done in January, I believe, but we can as we go through this, we can see that.
Okay.
But really, there were some major hiccups that I can talk about, some challenges that made it delayed.
Sure. So let's talk about the cast of characters. It isn't easy being a rock. Catchphrase there. So let me actually bring up your cover here. And are these the four main characters before we jump back to the other image?
That's correct. So that's Gem. She's the main character in the middle. And then Obsidian, Pyrite, and Opal are her kind of the secondary characters that go on the adventure with her.
Okay. And so you obviously put in a large amount of work designing these characters. And here it looks like you maybe explain this graphic here on Pinterest.
Yeah, so Pinterest was very useful in setting up these mood boards for everything in the story. So I have Pinterest boards for every single character, just kind of what their style is like, who they are. So any kind of image I could find that will help the artist that I was working with conceptualize them. And then for all of the rocks and minerals, there's 72 different rocks and minerals mentioned in the book. And every one of them has a Pinterest board with examples of what that mineral looks like for the other artist who's doing the glossary illustrations. So just a lot of usefulness to making Pinterest boards.
Right. And somebody had asked in the chat, you mentioned getting an editor and your editor letting you know, giving you some advice. At what point did you bring an editor in?
So after I had written the feature script, that's when I brought in the editor.
Okay.
Because I didn't know anything about writing a book.
Right.
For some reason, writing a feature script seemed really easy, but writing a book, I didn't know anything about that. And that's when I brought in the editor, had them look at the feature script and make recommendations. And that was a big impact on my progress as well, because so all these references here and everything were for the initial character designs. And if we swipe through these, we'll see the characters were initially designed to be much older. They were in their teens. They were actually in high school.
Oh, interesting. So versus what you wound up with here, yeah.
Correct. So these are their early character designs. This is almost the first pass here. And they were in their high school characters. And then it wasn't until the editor said, if you're writing a book for middle grade audience readers, then your characters should be in middle grade as well. So you'll see in this deck, there's a little place where it says, all right, put everything on hold and redesign all the characters. So here's some more progress on the character designs.
So who sketched these out?
So these two are from friends of mine, Joel Sigua and Jose Segura. So I brought them on. They're really talented artists to explore what these characters would look like, and they have very different styles. So it was nice to see kind of how that played off each other.
Right. And so, creating, because you don't do humans for your job, right? You're doing cellular animation, that kind of thing. So you must have made the leap and said, you know what, I'm just going to get somebody who's really good at this instead of trying just to, hack it together yourself. I mean, did it cross your mind to try and do your own character designs, or did you immediately say, I know these guys from whatever work or storyboard artists, I'm just going to bring them on right away?
I did draw a couple of my own, and that was a pretty quick realization that I shouldn't do that. So
yeah,
I immediately handed those off to the artists and said, you guys can do much better. And it was definitely the right decision to make for me. Obviously, if you're a very talented character artist, go for it, but it's not my strength. So
right.
I'm good at giving feedback. So you can see these notes here. I know what I want and to visualize it. So I would work back and forth with providing feedback and getting the characters updated.
Right. Okay. So, it takes a bit of a commitment and a jump to start enlisting people and paying them, right? And so you have to give yourself like a budget, and you're bringing people on to work on your project, and you want, so again, it's like you decided that you're really going to go for this at some point and put some some money towards it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely had to make an investment, even at the early stage. Not making large investments yet, but I definitely believe in paying everybody that I work with. So I'm almost 100% certain that there isn't anybody that did any free work on my project.
Well, that's a key, right?
I've many free projects myself.
Yeah, it's
they
like
haven't really gone anywhere.
When you're younger, you often enlist your friends and work on projects for free. And the thing is, there's no better way to destroy a friendship than work on somebody else's project for free. Because honestly, if you want to work on a project, you're going to want to work on your own project, right? If you have spare time, you're taking time away from your family or your job or whatever, or sleep, you don't want to work on somebody else's project for free. Yeah. You want to work on your project.
And again, there's nothing wrong with working on a project for free. Like, again, I've done it in the past when I was younger, a lot of experience, but on this project, I just wanted it to do it the way I thought was right.
And so looking at this character sketch, did your son jump in with any suggestions on the characters as well, or did you pretty much art direct that yourself?
I mean, he definitely had a say. What looks funny was really the main thing that he was focused on.
What looks funny?
Pyrite, right. Yeah, Pyrite is his favorite character. So the goofy one right there in the center.
This guy right here? Okay.
Is definitely his favorite because he's the silly character.
So. Right. These are so cool. It's funny
so you see now.
Oh, go ahead. Well, I was going to say it's funny working in 3D so long. I used to be a pretty good traditional artist. I used to be a painter, a wildlife painter. And, now when I look at other people's artwork and think, God, I wish I could do that. It's not some super great 3D image. It's these little sketches. I look at these and think, man, I wish I could do this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, so Joel, who did these ones here, he pretty much draws a character every day and posts it on Instagram.
Wow.
So to do characters this well, you kind of have to do it every day.
Right. Yeah.
That's his passion. So
yeah.
So these were pretty much almost final at this point, at the end of 2017. And then I think in the next couple of pages, they're in color. So we went from here to, those are the parents. And then we started doing color. And then I think the next slide has them in what was considered the final character designs in phase 1. So early 2018.
Okay.
These were the final characters. This is where I said, you know what, I'm ready to start pitching this as a feature. I have a script written. I have these. Let me do some more concept art. So I brought on a couple of additional guys. You'll see on the next slides to do some initial concept art.
Because at this point, these look really cool. They're significantly different than what you have on the cover here. So clearly you're still moving. So that's sort of just before I move on. I mean, that's just a question. How do you, especially when you're dealing with the budget and everything else, how do you know when you're done? When did you are you relying on your own sort of instinct or feedback from others or some combination of the two?
I missed the part of the question.
Oh, just like how do you know when they're done, right? I mean, these look
Yeah.
really cool. These are really cool characters. They look awesome, but you change them quite a bit. So at what point do you decide, when do you know you're there?
I mean, it's really hard. It's really kind of, you have to say, okay, I'm done. And then I got to move on to the next thing. So those characters, even though maybe I wasn't 100% happy with the way they were at that phase, they were what I needed to get to the next level.
Right.
So I gave those characters to two other artists. And again, I'm finding a lot of people on ArtStation. So that's where this artist is from.
Oh, God, I love ArtStation.
Yeah, I just go through people's portfolios and I bug them and I contact them like, can you please do this? I'll pay you. It's kind of funny how many people don't respond. The whole saying about artists needing jobs and stuff, I won't comment on it, but a lot of people don't respond. They're all busy. But
yeah, there's no question. Yeah, there's a lot of people, particularly really talented artists, they have all the work they can handle, and they don't want to. Yeah, they're just not. They probably get a bunch of offers they simply don't respond to. Yeah,
that's absolutely.
But there's not a shortage of talent, right? There's like if like you said, if you go to ArtStation, there is so much talent out there. It is insane how much talent is out there. And so being able to, like you said, to extend yourself, reach out, contact people. I do this for the contract work I need for my business, Sabretooth. You put yourself out there and you contact people, and eventually you'll find some good matches. And there's just, like you said, there's just no shortage of really talented people out there.
Yeah, and absolutely. And then what's great is finding people who are talented and easy to work with. So, these guys were super great to work with. I really enjoyed the process, and they were so different. So you can see this one here, how Nikolai here represented the Stibnite giant, and then because that one I didn't actually have character designs for yet. It was just here's Stibnite reference, and it's a giant rock monster, and he did this. And then on the next slide we have Tomislav's artwork, and he did it a completely different style for the Stibnite giant.
Yeah.
Both just gorgeous illustrations.
Oh, I love this. Yeah. And this looks like it could be a multiplayer game, actually.
Yeah, so it's just really amazing textures and lighting on his artwork.
And this,
so I was going to use these as like our, my wallpaper for my computer, as well as anything I need promotional images for, whether it's the treatment deck, website, anything else like that.
Right. Okay. So you've got characters put together, not final, but near final, and you're starting to get some concept art. Are these scenes from the book? These two images?
Yes.
So these are, so you're getting some scenes from the book.
It's the same scene. Yeah, it's the same scene done by two different artists.
Oh, okay. That's what okay. So this is just two different interpretations of the same scene. Interesting. But
exactly.
they're both really cool.
It's a critical point in the story where our hero Jem kind of faces this Stibnite giant.
Okay. And so where are we going from there?
So now that I had that, I needed to do something else, and I was like, you know what? Again, when you say when are you happy with the stuff, and when do you know it's done?
Right.
Well, when you don't feel like it's really done, you want to keep going. So I found another amazing, talented artist on ArtStation. Her name's, I think it's Bea, how you pronounce it, from Skywriter Studios in Spain. And I just loved her work. And I said, can you please redesign my characters? Take what I have and kind of do what you do. And her partner did these sketches here. And they basically went through a process of redesigning Jem to make her more appealing. That was my goal. How do I make her more appealing, more animated looking, less kind of graphic novel and feature film? Because I think what we had so far looked like it could be VFX based film.
Right.
I wanted more animated film.
Yeah, this is a little bit softer, and honestly, her eyes and face are very expressive in these images. And that really jumps out at me as just a much more expressive sort of character here. Gosh, this person's super talented.
Oh, yeah. So they did these sketches, and then if we go through some of these pages, there's iterations. So you can see even within their studio, the two different artists there have very different styles. So one of them is very much into like very anime graphic looking, and the other one is more traditional.
Right. So are they partners? Or it's just like a little company?
Yeah, they're. I don't know exactly how big they are. I mean, I just know there's at least two people there,
Right.
and I found their portfolio, and I love their work. So just some of these character poses and facial expressions, I mean, they're just amazing.
Yeah, these are great. So you must have been really excited getting these images back. Seeing your character sort of coming to life like this.
Exactly, it was really awesome.
What were your kids' reactions to these?
It's hard with kids. Their reactions are usually pretty subtle. They're like, "Yeah, that's cool." So, yeah.
Do you know how hard this was?
Exactly. So then we designed all the other three characters as well. So Obsidian, there's Opal there in the middle. She was very different at this point. Pyrite.
Mm-hmm.
So going through these iterations. Here I'm doing some like A and B testing, posting these on Instagram and seeing what people think.
Right. Okay. Good idea.
Yeah, it really helped out kind of know where my limits were and where I was going in the right direction or not. And this is basically where we ended up with our teenage characters.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it just seems so difficult. Like looking at the evolution of these characters, it's just so interesting that if you rewind the tape of history, so to speak, and did it again, you could have stopped at a completely different point, and had very different looking characters.
I think, when you're working at a large studio, you have the benefit of a lot of artists, a lot of iterations really fast to get to where you want to be. Working by yourself as an independent person trying to create a thing, the best thing you have is time.
Right.
So the fact that the 2 years went by was actually very beneficial to allow the characters to develop and become who they are now. If it wasn't for that time, if it was rushed out, right away, it wouldn't have been as great.
And so here it looks like you're doing some material work after you've got the character designs in a place where you want to move forward.
Yep. And then we basically have all the characters fully rendered in 2D. Next slide, they're all in color. And these were my final characters again.
So this is 7/24/2018. If I go back here and look at some of the early ones, I love it that you put the dates here. 10/1/2017. So almost a year later, like 9 months later. Is that right? Something like that. Very different. Yes. I mean, look at these. I mean, it's kind of startling how different they are. Yeah. And part of that's a function of the artists as well. Yeah. I was going to say part of that's just a function of the artists that you had contracted.
Yeah, no, there's one thing I learned really well in this whole process is if you have a look in mind, make sure the artist matches that look. Don't try to get an artist who you think is really good and then try to get them to do a look that you want, but it's not their style.
Right.
That is just a recipe for disaster.
Right.
Don't do it. Just don't.
Right.
I did that several times in this process, and every single time it was a headache. So.
Not working, right. So here you've got you got your characters sort of July 2018, almost August 2018, and then you're saying if you want to write a kids book, they need to be kids.
Yep. So that was my big shocker from my editor, which made me go, "Wait, I just spent all this money and time designing these characters."
Oh man!
Do whatever you want to do. So I said, "All right, you're the editor. I'll take your advice. And I will listen to you, and I will rewrite my story. They will not be in high school, and they will be kids." So I brought on another artist who had more kid-looking characters to do some designs. One of them did this one, and even though I like it, I think it was too young for the story. If it was more of like a simpler story, this would have worked great, but I wanted somewhere between those two.
Right.
So back to the original artist who did the first concepts and said, hey, look at the style that we have established now, and then we need to make them younger. Is that something that you can do? And he was like, sure, why not? And he was able to do that.
Yeah, that is, I mean, that is crazy that you went through all that effort to arrive here and then just like had to backtrack and kind of move back. Like, but clearly it was the right decision. I mean, at least you were open to making that change, because I know the momentum you had must have been like, no, come on, man, let's just.
No, there was parts of the story that, they're in high school. They were cheerleaders before, and all of that had to be kind of removed, and the story had to be changed so that, they became, so they were called the Rockettes. They were the cheerleader group that Jem was on, but now they were in elementary school, and it became a soccer team. So I had to change the story from cheerleaders to she's a soccer player, and she's on the Rockstars team. So lots of changes like that had to happen.
So one of the questions from chat is, what kind of mood boards did you send over to the artist to draw inspiration from? Is that the Pinterest boards you had? Was that what you sent over to the artists?
That's right. So it was mostly the Pinterest boards. I do have like a treatment deck that you saw some of these images in as well.
Right.
But what's great is those are actually public. So if you go onto Pinterest and search for hidden gems, you'll see all my mood boards, all the boards that are for them. So they're all there. And this just shows actually exactly that question. So here is the Pinterest mood board for the lady's face. Then there's one for what the celestite mineral looks like. And then there's some progression for what the character design looked like. And then this is why I didn't do the drawings. That's my version right there.
This one?
Yeah. That was me trying to explain what I wanted the character to be like.
Oh, that's awesome. There you go.
Take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, stick it together.
Kind of looks like troll face.
The artist figured it out.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, cool. All right.
So now we're getting into the illustration. So once all the characters were designed, there were 30 illustrations needed, since I wanted a chapter illustration for the beginning of every chapter.
And let's be clear, it's not really a graphic novel. It's a novel with illustrations, right? It's a novel, but you have illustrations at the beginning of each chapter and maybe sprinkled throughout the chapters?
Just at the beginning of each chapter.
Just at the beginning. And having gone through all this effort with the characters, you must have been thinking, a little bit farther afield than just a novel, thinking, okay, we're going to have this illustrated novel, but I want to nail these characters down in case we end up doing an animated show or a game or a feature film or something like that, correct? I mean, is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, no, the end goal is still the same. So I started this process for a feature animated film, and I haven't let go of that. That's not something that I'm not pursuing anymore.
Right.
It's just I've taken a very indirect route to get there. I've written the book, it's published, I'm working on the next one, but the goal is that I'm going to get this into the hands of the right person who's going to be interested in turning it into a feature film.
Right.
And I do, I've been in contact with studios and different people who would be interested, and just continuously pitching this as a concept.
Oh, that's awesome. And so
they're going to come to life one day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're so far. I mean, you've come so far. And this. So, looking at the map here, did you sketch this out on a napkin, so to speak, or how did you come up with this?
Yeah, I mean, basically took the story that I had written and reverse engineered the map.
There you go.
In a way that would make sense, and it just gives you kind of the landmarks for the different locations that they're going in. So if like physically try to follow the map, you could probably get to from point A to point Z in a direct line without going through the rest of it, but it's all there.
Well, a map, I can't overstate how much a map is important to sort of an epic journey type story, and nothing like really makes that more apparent than if you'd watched The Witcher on Netflix. I don't know if, I'm sure a lot of people listening have watched The Witcher. If you look at Game of Thrones, it always starts off, the opening sequence is the map. Or if you go back to Tolkien and The Lord of the Rings, they always refer back to the map. The Witcher had no map, and you really had a hard time following what's going on. I even played the game and everything. I'm like, okay, man, really need a map here. I don't know where any of these locales are, how they relate to each other. And so, yeah, totally, it's important to have a map as part of your, just sort of a point of reference if you're really into this world and sort of the world building aspect of creating something. A map is just hugely important.
Yeah. And again, all the best books have maps, so mine had to have a map.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, we got some 3D here.
Yeah, we get into character modeling. So I guess my main point I'd like to make is don't start your character modeling too early. That is the key thing.
Don't start too early.
Because as you saw how many times the characters evolved over a course of years.
Right.
What we started modeling, initially didn't make sense anymore. So to remodel it every single time the character design changed. So wait till they're final.
Right.
Then start the model.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Nobody jumped out of a window having to redo these over and over again?
Yeah. No, brought on, again, same thing like the illustrations. I've worked with a bunch of different artists, different phases to do some modeling.
Right.
And even these were the latest ones here. So these just, like you can see, January 1st, 2020.
So did you so are these just from a interest standpoint, were these done in ZBrush? Did you contract somebody to do them? Were they done in Modo, or who made these? Did you make them?
So these ones right here were modeled in ZBrush and then exported to Maya. So that's where those are.
Okay.
I'm currently in the process of getting these retopologized because they're super heavy models. So they need to be, I'm looking for assistance and help on this. That's where I am right now. These got to be retopologized, rigged, and painted and shaded and everything. Because right now this is just a work in progress version of these characters.
Right. So you're continuing to move forward with the 3D characters and. Okay. So these are we moving on to the gems now or the minerals?
Yeah. So just as I mentioned, Pinterest, what do you call them? Boards for each of those different rocks and minerals. And on the next slide, you'll see what the talented Josh Lockwood did for each of those different rocks and minerals.
Wow.
Because as you're reading the book is black and white inside. So as you saw those illustrations, you won't necessarily get a sense of the color of everything.
Right.
So it's very important to have this glossary. So we're speaking about how Jem's mom is an amethyst. It's important to know what that looks like.
Right.
And that's what this glossary was for.
So in terms of just world building and this world that they're living in and everything that you've sort of put together inside your head with the map and the locale and the meaning, how the characters are related to the minerals and gemstones, is how much of that did you actually put into the book, and how much of it is still just in your head, so to speak? Do you understand the question?
Not really.
Okay, so when you're creating like a world, you're fleshing it out pretty fully in your head. But you don't have time to put all of that, especially in a middle school book that's 80 pages or whatever it is. And so how much actually got in there and how much is still sort of stuck in your head that you want to put out in terms of the world building?
Yeah. Okay, I get it. So when I write, I let the story write itself. So when I sit down, I have a general concept of point A to point B, what's going to happen.
Right.
But the details are pretty vague. So it all kind of unfolds as I'm writing. So it's all on the paper. But then I'm going back and trimming stuff out. So there's a lot of things that happened when I first wrote the book that are no longer in the book. So the first 10 chapters were edited out, where it was like when Jem first arrives at her house with her parents, she's a baby, then she goes to the playground, and then she does this, and then she does that. There's all these actions that happened that were edited out. There were characters that are still in the book, but their story changed. So there's a lot of things that I'm putting on paper and then taking back out and keeping it stored away for the next book.
Okay.
The next idea. Yeah.
Right. And so cover design. So just give us on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is cover design?
Sorry?
Well, I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is cover design? In terms of...
I think you're breaking up because I can't kind of hear you.
Oh, sorry, Kane. So I guess I want to... Can you hear me? Are we losing you?
I hear you back and forth. But do you want me to talk about the cover design?
Yeah, let's talk about the cover design.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So this was a really, really great example of... I hired somebody who's an absolutely amazing artist, but it was definitely the absolute wrong decision for this book. He did an amazing job with the characters and did this awesome cover. But as you can see, it looks like something from Michael Bay. It looks like they're Transformers. It just was the wrong thing to do. And I just fell in that trap of really being enamored by somebody's work and wanting to work with them.
Right.
And I shouldn't have done that. I should have picked an artist that was more in the style that the book needed. That same thing happened on that second one there. And then we went back to the drawing board, and these are my sketches for what the different concepts for the cover could be.
Right.
And again, all of this happened because the artist that I was working with for the illustrations, he does black and white, but he doesn't do color. So I was kind of stuck. I needed somebody who could do both. And that's why I went those other routes. But then since that didn't really work, I went back to him. And these are his sketches here. And he did the line work for the cover. And then I went back to the artist at Skywriter Studios who did the colors for the teenage version, and basically had them collaborate. So Joel did the illustrations and the line work, and Bay did the colors for the characters.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, this was one of the longest processes is getting the cover done.
So I really like it that you focused on the 4 characters there.
Yeah, so these are early versions of the cover, and I was ready to ship. Actually, the one on the right side there, that was one of the first ones I did the print-on-demand publishing. So some people have that edition, which no longer exists. After I did this one, before I sent it to the printers, I was dying to send it. I was like, I want to hit send. And then I brought on a designer friend, and she said, "You're not happy with that, are you?" I was like, "Nope, I'm not." She said, "You should change the background. If you're not happy with it, change it." And this was at a point where, again, I was ready to send to the printer.
Right.
And she convinced me. She was right. So I brought on Josh Lockwood back on, who did the glossary illustrations. And I said, we're keeping the characters, but I need a new background. So he did this cave-like environment full of rocks and minerals, and the designer did the text on the bottom, and we have our final cover.
Well, I think that was a good decision. I mean, I look at this, and I'm focusing on the 4 characters there and sort of vignetting them around this, the cave, rather than having one of the more epic covers with the sort of action scene. I just think this pops. I don't know. It just seems a lot more. I think if you're a kid, you're going to be interested in those characters, right? And it really showcases them.
Yeah, and the environment kind of sets the tone for the adventure. Like that's what was missing when it was just the characters.
Right.
You're like, okay, what are these characters? They're weird looking. I don't understand them. They're not relatable because they're rocks and minerals. And what's the story about?
Right.
And that's what was missing. What is the story about? And once you put them in that cave, okay, it's an adventure story. I get it.
Exactly. Right. Like the expressions on their faces and everything, it makes more sense because they're in the environment, obviously, on some sort of journey. versus, yeah, sort of taken out of context in this one here, you know.
Yep.
Cool. Very
So that's
cool.
how we finally ended up with a cover for the book.
And I noticed on the video you put out that you sprung for the holographic text there, or for the hidden gems right up here. Like how were you even presented with options? Like when you did the self-publishing, like how did you know, like what sort of, take us through that process. Like how do you, pick the paper and the hardcover material and the, all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to be part of a Facebook group of children's authors, and there's just a lot of great information and things you learn from being in that group and asking questions from people. So I would say definitely, if you're going to do something like this, find a community of people who are doing the same thing, because you'll all learn from each other.
Right, right. And then, so when you self-publish, what does that entail exactly? You send it off everything with all the instructions to a printer, and they send you the books, and then you distribute them or make them available for order, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I'm doing both print on demand as well as pre-printed. So there's a paperback version that all I do, yeah. It took a long time to convert the files properly from InDesign to the formats that they needed, but you upload the correct formats to Amazon, and once you get it all correct, basically people, as soon as somebody orders the book, they'll just print it and send it to them. The downside is you don't get a lot of custom features, so you have nothing special on the cover, and inside it's all black and white. So the beautiful full color glossary images are black and white in that version. That's why they're also on the website, so that anybody who gets that version can go on the website and see it in color. The one that I got printed, so I could have printed in China and used something like a service like Print Ninja or the IAPC, which is Independent Authors Publishing Collective, or I could have printed local. There's some printers local that I talked to, but my goal was to get the cover to have a holographic foil stamp on it, and the local printer couldn't do that. So I finally found one in the US that could do a holographic foil on the cover, and basically work with them to get the book printed.
So how much of your budget at the end of the day went to creating the content, doing the character revisions, the cover, all that stuff, versus doing a first run of the prints without knowing if you'd ever sell any? Like, how much, what percentage, I guess, of the budget went to the printing versus the creation?
I mean, the printing was probably a third of my budget.
About a third. So you've spent a certain amount of money. At that point, you spend, $10,000, and then once you start printing, you're looking at another half of that, essentially, if it's a third. So you're like, geez, I'm like only 2/3 of the way there. And you don't know if you're going to, sell any of these, obviously.
I printed 5,000 copies, and that was about $10,000 or $12,000 to print 5,000 copies. And I have 4,600 in my garage right now.
So one of the things we'll do is
obviously on selling them, but it's going to be a long, slow process.
And so we'll put all the links and everything, obviously, in the YouTube video and the Pixel Fondue story, and then we'll listen to, everybody can else tweet those out and send them out. We'll try to spread the word here, obviously, for your book and get more of those sold. But it's really, it's interesting to me. Like, for instance, what was your wife on board with spending all this money? These are the types of things, like if you want to do a project, these are the types of questions you have to deal with, right?
Yeah, I mean, she's on board for sure. And, I'm borrowing for myself. So some of it's coming from, I have a house. I'm fortunate enough to have a house that has some equity. Some of it's coming from the equity on that. And then some of it's actually coming from my independent stuff that I do on the side. So outside of my day job, I also do some, side stuff here and there from people in the past, and I use that money to then fund my creative writing stuff.
Right, a little bit of freelance work on the side, and you can use that to fund this project. Yeah, well, exactly, right. You got to find a way to do that, And so one of the questions I'm seeing here is like, how do you get places like libraries or maybe grade schools to buy your book? If you started that process to try and contact places like that?
Yeah, I'm doing everything I can to figure out different places where they can be. So I walk into a library and I say, how do I get it into your library? And they give me some information and say, contact this person. And then, there's all these rules and restrictions. We won't carry your book unless it's traditionally published. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try anyway.
Right.
So there's the Contra Costa Community Library. And right now I'm in the process of trying to get it in that library system. And I said, you know what? Look, take a look at the book. I'll send you a copy. If you think it looks professional enough and well edited, carry it in your library.
Well, what about
that's all?
What about like a rock and gym show? Like those things. Like I've been to like shows in Tucson where they're just giant, like week long things of like rock. Have you thought about setting up a booth there and putting the book out?
Yeah, no, I've thought about that. Haven't really pursued that avenue just yet. I do have some book fairs that I've signed up for. There's one in Berkeley that I'm going to be have a table at in May or something. I've walked into Barnes and Nobles and said, can you guys carry my book? And they said, well, you don't have a distributor, so no, but we do have author events that if you're interested. So now I have actually February 15th at 2:00 at Barnes and Nobles in El Cerrito. I will be there. And with 4 other authors, we'll have tables talking about our books and maybe selling them.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, the Rock and Gym show just popped into my head because my daughter was really interested in gyms when she was about your kid's age. And if we were at a show, like, there's no doubt I would have bought that book because you're just there for hours and you can only buy so many, like, things of pyrite or whatever. And you're like, hey, book. They'll read it, And so that may be like a good place to look at. Or also, have you gone to Silicon Valley Comic Con?
I go to these things, but I haven't had a table there.
Right. So. And so I've definitely bumped into some 3D artists who sell books of like concept art and things like that at Silicon Valley Comic Con. I'm sure they go to the one in LA or San Diego as well. And so it just seems like there's a once you're done, you're not done, right? You have this whole promotion and selling and
the marketing is probably going to be the most expensive thing. So right now, again, I just got the book, about a month ago. So now I can actually get it out there. But, all of the marketing that I'm going to start doing, whether it's Amazon pay-per-click marketing there or Facebook ads or Instagram ads, like there's a lot going on there to get word out. Because the biggest problem is, I'll say this, it doesn't matter how good a book is. It really doesn't. It could be a great book. It could be a horrible book. If nobody knows about it, no one's ever going to buy it. So the most important thing is just letting people know that it exists. Once you can do that, then everything else will take care of itself. But if they don't know it exists, it doesn't really matter.
Right. So you really need to tap into the community that you're already a part of, the 3D community, and spread the word there a little bit, kind of like we're doing here. But also, like, this is something not all artists are good at, is extending themselves beyond that and being able to walk into a library and say, hi, my name's Kane, I have a book. And, it's not...
You have to have, I would say, the guts to do it. Like there's the Publishers Group West. One of their headquarters is here in Berkeley. And I literally knocked on the door and they're like, who are you? I'm like, I have a book.
Right.
I want you guys to carry it. They're like, this is awkward. But I was like, I don't care. She's like, I'll give it to the person who handles this kind of stuff. I was like, sure. That sounds great. Here's 2 copies. Give it to her. And then I call back. Hey, has she had a chance to read it? No. So I'm just going to keep knocking on that door, and maybe they'll be interested in distributing my book. But you just can't have any fear. You can't what if this? What if no? Just try it.
Yeah, you got to move forward.
What's the worst that could happen?
Exactly.
Nothing.
Yeah. And so have you thought about some other merchandise like t-shirts, things like that, or like even like again, this is takes more money and everything else, but I think like little figurines of those characters are so cool, you know.
Oh yeah, so definitely that's all of that is in kind of in the plans. So getting them 3D printed. Once the characters are finished modeling, I would love to 3D print them, get those painted, little figurines.
Well, you may be able to even team up with people who, again, going back to the rocks and minerals aspect of this. I mean, that's a huge industry selling, gemstones and things like that, and being able to listen. You could buy your kid a piece of obsidian, or you could buy your kid an obsidian base with this cool character on it. Which one do you think they're going to be more into, right? And that may be again like a good way of getting your foot in the door, but definitely like just because I've been exposed to this whole rock and gym thing because of my daughter's interest as a child, this was her big interest, for years. I mean that's like a whole world. Like there's tens of thousands.
There's a store in Berkeley that sells rocks and minerals, and I've been talking to them. Are you interested in carrying my book? So we're kind of going back and forth to see if they would carry the book. Also, just these author events, I'm trying to rent out giant pieces of, geodes and things like that, so I can put it on the table and have like a very impressive looking stand for people to catch their attention.
Totally.
So that's the other thing is it's not just about being at those events, but having those rocks and minerals with the book really draws a crowd. The last event I did, I had a bowl of little tiny, all sorts of little rocks and minerals, and kids would just dig through it and just kind of trying to find their favorite one. And that kept them there for 10, 15 minutes.
Right. That's actually a really good idea.
Very popular.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm really glad to have you on here. I've got another appointment I've got to run to, but send me all the links for everything. I know that they're on the end of your PDF there, and we'll spread the word. I'm just going to reach out to the Moto community and Pixel Fondue community to like help Kane spread the word about this book. And this is the type of thing, again, we would do for anybody else who's publishing something like William Vaughn, of course, has had a lot of success with the book that he has put out. He and his wife have put out a couple years ago. And, I just love seeing this happen. People actually take the time to put their ideas that have been bouncing around in their heads into the real world. And what I really caught my eye about you initially, of course, was your sort of cost breakdown of how creating this book and looking at all the sketches. And it's really pretty eye-opening, like how much effort you had to go through to like just arrive at these final characters, and especially considering you essentially had to start over once you thought you were done because they were too old. I mean, that's amazing, like how much work you put into that.
Yeah, it was definitely a process, and it's not over. Like I said, I'm working on the next book because this one's done. Got to do something else now.
Yeah.
And I'm still planning on getting this turned into a feature film. And who knows how many times the characters will change before that happens.
Right. Yeah.
It's a process.
Ever evolving. All right, Kane. Well, thanks for joining us, and thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And so we'll get this up on Pixel Fondue later today, and we'll get a story out there. And again, I just urge everybody to share this and share the links as much as you can to try and get the word out there for Kane's book. And like I said, we'll have, I think a couple weeks we'll have Keyshot on here going back to sort of more sort of traditional 3D stuff. But anybody else who's published anything or is working on a project, contact me, because I just think it's so important to see people break out of their booth, their cubicle, so to speak, and be able to create some art and that's interesting to them on a personal level and put it out there for everybody to see. And so, all right, Kane, so back to the salt mines of biotech animation for you.
Exactly.
Back
to cells.
Back to cells. All right. And again, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll catch you guys on the next live stream. All right. So see if I can figure out how to stop the live stream now. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.